evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the April 23rd edition of Effective, Efficient, Affordable, and above all, accountable to you. My name is James Roberts. I'm joined once again this evening by John Gauger.
Thank you, James.
John, good evening. This evening, we would like to explore the notion that if you focus too obsessively on the trees, you will miss the forest entirely. Your Board of Selectmen, a majority of your Board of Selectmen, are very focused on trees, ladies and gentlemen. They are giving you detail after detail, voodoo math after voodoo math as to why you should support the budget. You are being told that this budget accurately reflects our revenues. It does not. You are being told that this budget accurately reflects our expenses. It does not. You are being told that this budget actively solves the deficit. It does not. You are being told that this budget will move the town forward. It will not. You are being told that this budget will maintain your taxes flat. It will not. This budget will entail a gigantic tax increase for you. You are being told to focus on details which are irrelevant or misleading so that you will not see the forest, the big picture in the budget. And what is that big picture, ladies and gentlemen? What is it that we want from a budget?
Well, let's look at the revenue side first. I mean, the revenue side is,
Technical issue
put together to essentially pay for what we spend or the expense side. And, you know, as with everything, there are certain estimates you make. And I guess we're saying that the estimates are a far cry from being estimates, and they are approaching fraud, to me.
They are manufactured.
They're manufactured. Let's start with Sewer and Water Commission. As everybody knows, the Sewer and Water Commission held their public hearing, and as of the 1st of April, I believe they put a 35% increase for sewer and another 20% for water. And yesterday, there is an article in a Republican saying that they're tracking their revenues from last year and looking at the projected revenues to this year. And lo and behold, even with the 5% in for sewer and a 20% in for water, there was a 631,456 difference between fiscal years 2012 to 2013 and 2013-2014 for the water budget. And there was a difference of 259,000 in the sewer budget for the same period of time. So with the projected increases in there, going forward, they're projecting revenues that are 26 to 30% less than what was expected this year.
And this was kind of obvious, ladies and gentlemen. On the day that they announced these increases in rates, one of their largest single customers basically said, I'm a business, I can't take a 35% increase in my costs overnight, I'm leaving. And that's what is going to happen. That's what we said was going to happen, and it seems to be beginning to play out that way.
Well, you have to look at the user base. The user base is, you know, the old section of downtown and the restaurants and businesses on Main Street and the industrial park. You know, do you increase rates so high? You're no longer working in an elastic
right.
A world with rates. I mean, you're in an inelastic world, and your rates are so high that, you know, people are going out of business and closing.
Yeah, I mean, it's
and they're cutting back. And when you look at going forward with the user base that you have, these folks are saying that water and sewer with these rates are going to throw off revenue. It's going to be a revenue generator for the budget, and there's what, $600,000 worth of revenue in the budget?
$1 million all told.
$1 million all told. I think it was $700,000 for
the bonds,
and $300,000 for the. So with the rate increases, you're not even getting to the revenues that you generated last year, and you're $1 million down, and you think you're going to plug $1 million into the budget. I mean, how much fraud How much more fraudulent can that be?
Right. And why is this important? This is important because water and sewer is not quite as separate as everyone would have you believe. We have built, or it has been built, water and sewer has been built into the town budget. We have assumed $1 million of revenue coming from water and sewer to support town operations. And if water and sewer is not collecting enough money, if they're not collecting nearly as much money as they expected, then we should not necessarily expect that $1 million to come washing into the town budget.
Well, I mean, I'm going to repeat it again. With the 35% rate increase in sewer and the 20% rate increase in water, the projected revenue sources decline by $990,000, $1 million for this year's budget, and then they turn around and say they're going to collect $1 million of revenue from water and sewer to support the town budget. It's not going to happen, folks.
Not going to happen.
Water and sewer, if you continue the way you're going to lose customers hand over foot, and the rate structure is going to be so oppressive that people are going to walk away from their homes.
And it's not just the fact that rates went up and people are walking away. Remember that the budget that's been put in place for water and sewer, the new regime that they are operating under, has no capital. If the dam breaks, they will need to spend money, and that will be money that doesn't come to the town. If the pipes break, they will need to spend money. That money will not come to the town. They have one priority and one priority only. That is delivering you water, taking away your sewage. And if they have to spend money that's not in the budget to get that done, they will do that. They will have no choice, and all of that comes directly out of the town budget.
Right. So to expect $1 million in revenue coming into the town budget to support the town budget is pure fallacy.
So big picture number one, we said, what do we need the budget to do? One of the things we need the budget to do is accurately reflect all of our revenues, to get them all and to make sure that they're accurate. Here in water and sewer, we have a gigantic chunk of revenue that any rational observer would say is deeply suspect. It doesn't look like that revenue is going to be made available to us, and that is going to impact the rest of the budget. Now, that's not the only problem on the revenue side.
Well, let's go to the next one. Is we're closing the budget based on the projected revenue stream of an insurance claim, and an arrest has not been made, an audit has not been finished, and if anybody has ever dealt with an insurance claim with an auto accident, it takes a while. It will not see the light of day in this budget.
It takes a while. I mean, this is like buying lottery tickets. I mean, let's face it. Most of us actually do occasionally buy a lottery ticket. We know it's dumb, we know the math is working against us, but we do it. We spend the buck, we buy the ticket, we sit down with our beer or a glass of tea, and we imagine all the wonderful things that are going to happen when we win. Because for that 5 minutes, we actually believe we will win Mega Millions or whatever it may be.
Or whatever.
And then reality comes home and the tea gets cold and we understand that we actually have to go to work after all to pay the bills. None of us really buy lottery tickets to pay the phone bill. And yet this budget is buying lottery tickets with the expectation that that is going to pay your pension, or that is going to pay your benefits, or that is going to pay your staff, or that is going to pay the light bill, or that is going to pay for your children to be educated. The simple fact of the matter is there may be a claim. We don't know of a claim. We don't see a claim as being terribly likely, but who knows? We could get lucky. There could be a claim. But you don't budget on the basis of who knows we might get lucky.
You don't budget insurance claims in an operating budget.
No, you don't sit down at the beginning of the month.
If it comes in, it's one of these
woohoo
sources of revenue that flows right to the general fund, and you add it to your undesignated fund balance.
And that's the first issue with the insurance money. The second issue, and it's more of a sort of commonsensical issue, is even if there is a claim, ladies and gentlemen, it's probably not going to be made available to the general revenues of the town. If, Lord knows, if money was taken from a pension fund to pay town bills, that money will go back to the pension fund. If money was taken from the town to pay town bills, then the insurance company is going to say, well, that's what town money was supposed to be used for, and there's going to be no claim. So probably no claim, maybe a claim that actually goes somewhere other than the general revenues of the town, but this plain and simply is saying, we bought a lottery ticket, we think we're going to win, we're going to put it in the budget, and we think you should trust us.
I just want to get back to water and sewer for 1 second. And this is a philosophy, is water and sewer is going to be a net consumer of revenue. We, the town, are going to have to support it if we want to keep it in its current form. And I'm not saying that we want to keep it in its current form. I'm just saying that if you want to keep it in its current form, it is going to be consuming cash and not generating cash. The way that it has been reported to the public and sold to you is that water and sewer is going to be a cash generator and not a cash consumer. And the philosophy is dead wrong.
And as we explore this in greater detail, I think you're going to hear that same idea coming up over and over and over again. The idea that if we wish to maintain services in the format that we currently get them, we will need to produce more money. We have a choice. We must either produce more money or change the nature of the services.
Right.
And that's a fundamental part of the budget process that every town goes through every year. The idea that we sit down and we decide, what do we want for services? How do we pay for them? How do we make the services that we want match the money that we can produce? But back to the big picture again. What do we look for in a budget? We look for an accurate list of our revenues. And we look for one extra thing. We look for our revenues to actually exceed our expenses. Which brings us to the second thing we look for in a budget. We look for an accurate list of expenses. And we look for that list of expenses to be all of the expenses. And not just the expenses in a narrow accounting term, but anything that you and I would think of as an expense. Anything that uses cash.
When bills come into your household and you get a light bill or a phone bill and you take cash or your checking account or your credit card and you pay it off, that bill is resolved because you've had cash in some form to pay it off.
Now, an accountant would view that differently. They would say, if that bill comes from last year, we're not going to say that's an expense of this year. And that little detail is what...
Even though you use this year's cash to pay it.
And that little detail is what your civic leaders are using to justify what is perhaps the most egregious part of this budget. The fact that they haven't included one of our largest single expense items in the budget at all. The biggest and first use of cash next year will be to pay the deficit. Last year we had a deficit of $1.2 million. They've grown it, ladies and gentlemen. This year they're saying it's going to be at least $3.2 million. I think we would probably imagine it's going to be more. And
okay, you know, nobody is saying anything about it. Nobody is really reporting it. But behind the scenes, every agency out there that has a benefit coming from the town, i.e. a cash stipend coming from the town to close their budget holes, has not been paid.
Yeah, everyone is getting squeezed. We saw last Christmas the school board get squeezed to the tune of $3+ million. At the end of this year in June, a whole lot of people are going to be squeezed, ladies and gentlemen. The school board has already determined that they're going to be out hundreds of thousands, probably in excess of $1 million. You're going to see parents who drive their kids to school not being paid their gas money. You're going to see kids who go to special schools, and those schools will not have been paid. The insurance company is going to be saying, why should I continue to give you health coverage if you're not going to pay for it? CLMP is going to be saying, why should we keep the traffic lights working if you're not willing to pay for it? The simple fact of the matter is that we have a shoebox full of bills, ladies and gentlemen.
And they keep growing.
And they keep growing. We're not going to pay those bills this current year because we don't have the cash to do it. That's the deficit. We have spent more. We have spent all of our cash this year, and we still have extra bills that we can't satisfy. So next year, in the forthcoming budget, the first use of cash is going to be to open up that shoebox and pay the bills. And those are expenses that are not picked up in the budget. Again, the budget has to reflect every revenue and every expense and every use of cash. And the revenues have to be bigger or equal to the expenses and the use of cash. That in a technical sense, is the first requirement of your budget. And once again, the water and sewer revenues, unlikely to happen. The insurance revenues, totally fictional.
And the expense side is much greater than is being portrayed in this budget.
And there's absolute certainty around that expense side. We have the shoebox. It has bills in it. This is not a hypothetical series of perhaps bills. These are real bills that will need to be paid. So on that analysis alone, this budget doesn't do it. You're being sold a bunch of detail which purport to tell you that the budget works. Even at the level of the detail, the budget doesn't work. The revenue detail isn't there. The expense detail is wrong. This is a problem.
Now, let's step away from this, okay? The first thing after you have the potential fraud that we have had within the town of Winchester, the first thing you do after you've had the situation that we went through with the Board of Education is you would find a system, you would buy a system that is up to date, that runs a single accounting system where you can understand your revenues and expenses, i.e. when the revenues hit and i.e. when you pay a bill, the expense hits. And you would have one person running it. And it would be transparent, i.e. that if somebody wanted to know how much cash you had on hand at any given point in time, the system would generate that for you. There is nothing in this budget that addresses the fundamental problem of how do we keep track of this stuff?
Right. I mean, for example, a real-world example, we know that we have not been making contributions to the pension fund. We know that money has been set aside to be transferred to the pension fund but not actually paid. Trouble is, we don't know how much that money is. You know, a motion was made at the last Board of Selectmen meeting to actually fill in the pension fund. Not to cap it up to 100%, but at least take the money that was supposed, that someone actually said, I want to go into the pension fund, and put that money in at least. And we couldn't figure out what the number was, because we're not set up to actually know numbers. We're just set up to write numbers down on a piece of budget that match numbers on the other side of the piece of budget so that we can say the budget's balanced. Well, that's not the process, ladies and gentlemen. It's not about, just because you write it down on the piece of paper doesn't make it so. We need to know what the pension shortfall is, and we need to pay it.
Now, if you're an employee of the town and you're part of the pension plan, I mean, you would vote no on this budget because you don't know what is going in your pension fund.
Right. You only know that it's not going into your pension fund. I mean, it's scary. You know, we said on one level, what do you want your budget to do? You want it to accurately list your expenses, accurately list your revenues, and make sure your revenues exceed your expenses. But that's not all you want your budget to do. You also want your budget to go through this process of saying, what services do we want this year? How can we best provide them? And is that wish list reasonable in the context of how much money we can actually raise?
And we're going to go back to one of the first programs that we did, and we said the first thing you have to do is you have to restructure. You have to right size the service to the money that you're taking in to provide the service to the public.
Right.
You know, let's take the school budget. I mean, the school budget, the school personnel keep saying that they need multiple schools. At some point in time, you're going to have to come off that dime, and you're going to have to get down to one school.
Yeah.
I mean, there is nothing in the demographics going forward saying that we're going to have this big outburst of people or kids coming into the school system. There is not. And you have to start becoming more efficient. You're going to have to start pairing with other towns to provide the service because the cost is rapidly exceeding your ability to pay for the student in the current system that we have.
We have to decide what services do we want and how do we want them provided. This budget basically says we are going to continue down the track of having 2 schools administrations and 4 schools. We need to decide whether that is truly something we want and are willing to pay for. This budget says that we are not going to change the Department of Public Works other than doing with 1 less person. We need to decide whether that's truly a level of reorganization that we're comfortable with. We need to decide whether the budget should change the way that our fire brigades are organized, should change the way that our town hall is staffed, should change the way that our police are staffed. These are all fundamental questions that we need to address.
Right. I mean, one of the things that keeps coming up over and over again over the last 10 years is the staffing levels of the police department, the shift requirements, the amount of overtime, and it's always extremely exceeded on an annual basis. It becomes a laughing joke. You wouldn't see that in the public sector, or excuse me, in the private sector. What goes on in the public sector is just an atrocity. You would get the thing right-sized, you would get the contract restructured and in place to support the revenue that you have coming in to be able to pay the expense up to that level of revenue.
And the choices that we make to achieve that need to be sensible choices. You know, nothing has happened, for example, so far at the school board to determine how we will cut our proposed budget to meet even the budget that has been proposed by the Board of Selectmen. But it has been advanced by the superintendent that the way to meet that shortfall will be to cut out the purchase of computers for the school children, computers that they are supposed to be taking their tests on going forward. Now, I put it to you, ladies and gentlemen, would you rather take away computers from your school kids, or would you rather have a school closed? Would you rather take away computers from your school kids, or would you rather get rid of some of the administration? Would you rather take away computers from your kids, or would you rather the schools set about providing a level of education that is more in keeping with your ability to pay? We have a school system that is hell for leather, getting bigger and better. In the case of Gilbert, I would say it's getting better. In the case of the K-6 system, I would say it's getting bigger. But if you want either of those two things to happen, you're going to have to figure out how to pay for it, because neither of those two things fit within the confines of the current budget. We would argue that neither of those two things fit within the confines of what you can pay for.
Now, I'll throw this out there, is that, you know, for many years I said, you know, you need about 550 to 600 kids in a high school system to provide the services that you need for a variety of kids going forward into the university system. I mean, Gilbert finally got it. Gilbert is now going out and actively recruiting paying customers from other countries, and hopefully they'll be successful at it. Whether or not they are, you know, I don't know. But, you know, something switched there, and they do realize that they were on a death spiral themselves, and that if they didn't turn it around and do something, you know, the experience that they're having with the town now of not getting paid that's a going out of business strategy.
Yeah, I mean, Gilbert understood that they needed to marry their level of service that they wished to provide with the amount of money they could get. And they understood that the only way they could do that was by fundamentally restructuring their operation, by improving their operation and finding different sources of revenue. And that is what they're embarking upon, and who knows, maybe they will be successful. But the rest of town and the rest of our schools need to go through the same exercise. The final thing that this budget does not do, the final big picture thing which this budget does not do, is reinvest in the town. Our downtown is in a death spiral. It is in a vicious cycle of dereliction and despair. And that is because we have launched a war on downtown. We have loaded downtown with all of the taxes. We've done it again with water and sewer this time around.
Once more.
We killed them with the reval. We managed the reval so that downtown did not experience the full drop in valuations because we did not take account of the foreclosures and the short sales.
Exactly.
It has been a war on downtown. And if we are ever to turn around the prospects of our town, if we are ever to regain the ability to borrow, if we are ever to regain the trust of our citizens, if we are ever to regain the trust of Hartford, no less, we must reinvest in our town.
Or, you know, the final criteria is you just knock it down.
Knock it down.
And take the expense out. But the way it is sitting now, the precarious position that it is perched at, in terms of expense, the taxes and the user fees for water and sewer in many cases exceed the monthly mortgage payment
on the properties.
And many of those properties being Section 8 multifamily properties that were purchased in the heyday of the revenue, the real estate boom. you know, there's no more way to raise revenues in those buildings, and they'll be abandoned.
Right. So we're running short of time here, ladies and gentlemen. We said at the outset that we would explore the notion that if you look too obsessively at the details, you will miss the big picture. If you look too obsessively at the trees, you will miss the forest. You are being snowed, blindsided with a blizzard of detail, and you are missing the fact that the budget as proposed simply does not work. It does not represent an accurate compilation of the true expenses and cash uses of our town. It does not represent a true accounting of the revenues of our town. The actual revenues in the budget will not match the expenses. We will continue to grow the deficit. It does not address the current deficit. It does not address the need to restructure or right-size our services, and it does not invest in the town. We haven't made that collaboration between the amount of money we can legitimately raise and the level of service that we can legitimately expect. We have simply said we will raise more tax so that we may provide the same services even more inefficiently going forward. That's what the forest looks like, ladies and gentlemen. More taxes so we can have the same level of service delivered even more inefficiently. And it's being sold to you as a deficit fixer, a tax increase fixer, something that will move the town forward. It is none of those things,
none of those
ladies
things.
and gentlemen. Marianne Welcome is telling you, as we said last week, to sit down, shut up, vote yes, and pay your taxes. We are suggesting that you should spend a little bit of time, look at the detail, arrive at the big picture, and decide, is this budget addressing the deficit? Is this budget keeping your taxes flat? Is this budget providing you with a level of service you can afford? And is it doing so in the most efficient manner possible?
And I think you'll find that the answer is no, and I think you'll find that you're going to go out and vote no.
We certainly shall. With that, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and we will see you next week.
Thank you.